Okay, welcome to the Entrepreneur Mind Hacks. I don't know what you would call this. It's not a podcast. It's an HOA. That's the format. But I am talking today with another contributor to my book, Shawn Manaher. Shawn, how you doing?
I am doing fantastic. It is a 41 degrees in Atlanta, Georgia, a little cooler than expected, but it is sunny out as I look outside my window here, so it's going great.
Yeah, that's cool. We're probably close to 40. I'm in the mountains of Colorado. We're probably close to that today. It's melting off snow in a hurry. Well, we're going to dive right in. I think most people who have tuned into the event know who Shawn is. Shawn is doing an incredible, great podcast now called Sidepreneurs. He's got a website, sidepreneurs.com, as you can see on his lower third there. And Shawn was one of the contributors who contributed to the part of my book about making connections with people. And there's been a lot of talk about that subject lately in various ways, books that have been written and things like that. So I was excited to get Shawn's contribution, and I'm just going to go into what Shawn contributed and start kind of asking questions. And before we do that, though, I'm going to ask 5 really quick questions to Shawn where he can just give me a quick answer, and it'll help us get to know him a little bit. You game, Shawn?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, here we go. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Beach, okay. Chocolate or fruity?
Neither. So chocolate, okay, so chocolate, I don't eat sugar anymore, and fruity sounds like there's sugar in it, so I have to say neither.
Okay, that's a man who knows his decisions. He's committed. I appreciate that. All right, how about this one? Pickup truck or Mercedes-Benz?
Benz.
All right, yeah, I think I could have picked that one out for you, but anyway, okay, real book or Kindle?
Real book.
Okay,
You
cool.
should see my office.
Yeah,
My wife just said, you need a new bookshelf here.
yeah, I love the real thing too, but Kindle has its uses, that's for sure. Okay, how about let me think here. Beer or wine?
Neither.
Neither. Man, you're a neither guy. I get
I'm
it.
a neither. I don't drink beer. I don't drink wine. Yeah.
Okay, let's do this one then. How about salad or apple?
Salad.
Salad. Okay, I'm with you there. I mean, I like the apple, but salad, I'd rather have the salad. All right, thanks.
Green
Shawn.
apples are
Yeah.
really good. So, anyways.
Yeah, my favorite's Fuji. Fuji, man, they're so juicy and sweet. I love them. All right, man.
Like a Granny Smith apple. Those are really good with some almond butter.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Anyways, go right ahead.
That's fine. Yeah, we're doing a mind hack show, not a cooking show, in case you just joined us. So we're going to dive right into talking about mind hacks that have to do with connection. And Shawn wrote a little piece where he told a little bit of a story about connecting with the networking queen. That's what he called her. So Shawn, tell us a little bit about that story.
Oh man, Carrie, this was. If anybody says, well, what's the most embarrassing moment in your life? I experienced it last year. And to kind of set this up, my wife and I moved from upstate New York to Atlanta, Georgia, with the focus of building out one of my businesses that I own. And so this was very much of a in-person type of business that I wanted to make connections. And so we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and immediately within a couple of weeks of being here, we had said, okay, I need to go do some networking, something offline networking that I hadn't done a whole lot of. And so I decided to go to a couple events, and it was really starting to kind of get my groove into networking. And then I went to this event in Atlanta where there was this very obviously well-known individual who does a lot of networking in Atlanta, Georgia. And she was on stage doing a presentation. There was a segment of the networking event where there was somebody that spoke, and she was one of those speakers. And she talked about networking, what you should do and how you should dress, how you should act, what you should be saying. And so you could tell that she really knew all about networking. Well, she had some things to say about the individuals who are just starting out networking, and so I was really like, oh man, I really need to connect with her. So at the end of her presentation, I went up to her and I introduced myself, and she was just very affirming, very positive, very much like, hey, you're new to the area, let's make sure that you get connected. She actually offered So she offered to do a photo shoot of me when I got some new digs, because she had some very disparaging or very disparaging remarks about the clothing that I was wearing. So she said, you know what, Shawn, because on stage she was talking about what you should wear and dress, and this definitely, like, I'm totally out of character for a networking event. So she would have a lot to say. She said, you want to make sure that you're wearing a nice suit, you want to make sure it's clean, you want to make sure you have a handkerchief, you want to make sure you have nice shoes on, they're polished, you just got to look the part. And I told her what business I was involved in, and she said, Shawn, if you're telling me that you're in this line of business and you look like that, I'm sorry, but you look like you're a warehouse worker.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness, so stab in the heart. I was like, man, that's hard. And I took it with a grain of salt, but also took it very serious of what she was saying, of her perception as the networking queen that I called her, that she would know what to do. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna take her advice. But what ended up happening is that we connected at that event, but I didn't follow up. I didn't connect with her after the event, and that was a huge lesson learned, because when I did call her back, she had some interesting things to say.
Okay, so how long after, I mean, you say you didn't connect, but then when you did call her back, how long was it before you finally called her back?
It was 5 months.
Oh, wow. So 5 months after the event.
Yeah, and so I had, in my mind, I had good reason. So during that 5-month period of time of moving to Atlanta, I made some health decisions, and we kind of brought out a little bit with that. I had some health decisions that I wanted to make, and the result over those 5 months, from the point of which I saw her to the point of which I had contacted her, I was ready to get that photo shoot that she offered. And the reason why I was ready now is because I dropped 30 pounds. I went from an extra large guy to a medium in like a very quick period of time, and so I had to get new clothes, I had to get new digs, and I got them, right, and I was ready to go, and I figured, okay, let me call her. So I ring, say, hey, networking queen, this is Shawn Manaher. Do you recall connecting with me back a few months? Who? I was like, hey, this is Shawn Manaher. We had met at this event, met all this, and we talked, and you had talked about me doing, possibly doing a photo shoot, all this and that. She said, it's been a year since we talked. So she may have been confused on the timing, but the point was she was very upset. She was very upset that I took 5 months to reach out to her, and that was my own fault. That was my own and I own it 100%, that I should have, at the very least, been considerate enough to reach out to her on an ongoing basis. Now, I had early on emailed her a couple of times, just maybe once or twice, but I didn't continue that connection. And when I went to connect with her that follow-up time, she told me, she said, if you're going to network, then you need to connect. You need to make it consistent. You need to make sure that you're reaching out to people. And that, to me, was a huge lesson learned in my experience of networking offline.
So how did that affect what you do practically? I mean, you said you had reached out to her a few times with initial emails and things. So take that picture of what you did, and now what do you do since you've learned that lesson?
Yeah, this is a good question, Kerry. So what I do now is, in my networking, is that I'm organized. I have a plan in place. Before, much of the times, like a lot of things that I end up doing is I I fire, aim, and shoot. Or I don't know what the wording is, but basically I'm shooting first and aiming later. Right? I'm not thinking through what I need to do. So now I have a plan in place. So now when I meet somebody, I put them in an email database. I follow up with them on a more of a regular basis so that I'm connecting with them more meaningfully. And ultimately the purpose of networking is not just to network for nothing. Ultimately I'm trying to make my business grow. And so I am moving people down the sales funnel, so to speak, to get them to the point of a decision of whether or not they want to still connect with me or whether or not they want to do business. If they want to still connect with me, I'll still connect with them, but maybe not as much, and put them into a list of maybe tips and ideas that give them some value is into their business. But I definitely, the biggest lesson in kind of looking back and what am I doing now is I follow up via email. I have a plan in place so that I'm not repeating that same issue.
If you don't mind, I want to dig into that a little bit. Tell me about your system. How did you organize that? Because I mean,
so
what's in my head is there's people you really want to connect with, maybe influencers that you want to be able to stay connected with regularly, but then there's other people that, yeah, you want to stay connected, but not on the same level. And so, how do you differentiate that, and how do you keep them in the rotation, so to speak, so that nobody gets dropped?
So here's what I'm looking at, and specifically I'm looking at offline networking, and we could talk about online networking as well. But offline networking, what I also decided in that point or during that time was that I was going to a lot of events. I was going to open networking events where you basically can meet with anybody and connect with anybody. And then there's these things called closed networking events. And what I decided, in order so that people don't get dropped, is that instead of focusing on so many open networking events where I'm going to an event and I might see a whole bunch of 100 different people at one event, and then 100 different people at another event, then another 100 people, and I'm passing out my cards, and those really 5 minutes of really unmeaningful conversation that happen, and you might get connected. What I decided to do is I decided to go into a closed networking group. That in a closed networking group is that you are going to build relationships with the individuals so that you are building each other's businesses in a mutually beneficial way. And so in that, what I did in my system now is not so much in terms of the of trying to go to these open networking groups, but is to facilitate in connecting with individuals within this closed networking group. And so what that has looked like is there's a group of 12 of us in a closed networking group that I belong to. On a monthly basis, I'm meeting with 2 or 3 of those individuals to meet face-to-face, one-on-one for about a half an hour to 45 minutes. I get to know their businesses. They get to know my businesses. And then through that one-to-one connection that is building and growing a deeper relationship, they then are able to refer business to me at a higher rate and a more successful rate because they know me. I've spent time with them across from a table, across from Starbucks or whatever it is that I have for them to connect with me. And that in itself, it's not even a system, but is more of an ideology of, am I going to go after these lots of groups? Like, am I going to connect with 500 people, or can I connect with 12, and will that be more meaningful? My suggestion is do both, but when you're starting out, but ultimately picking a closed networking group is going to have a lot more value for your business. That's my experience anyway.
So let me push back on that for a minute. I mean, say your business is at a certain point, you need a connection with a certain type of individual, or an individual who's positioned in a certain place, and you don't know that individual. In fact, you might not even know who they are. It seems to me, being in a closed networking group with that being your main focus, as far as your influence or your ability to connect with that person you're seeking is related, is only as far as your closed networking group's connections are. But if you're
absolutely
out, so tell me how you'd go about that. If you know, I need a person with these skills, this ability, I need to make that connection so I get this opportunity, how would you go about finding that person?
Yeah, so the business that I'm building offline is called Nexus Effects, which is a local search engine optimization business. And in part of the business is that I offer web design services. And I don't myself do web design. I have a good eye, but I don't actually dig in and do the web design work myself. And so I'm saying that as an example of what your question is. So what I ended up doing is I had an opportunity with a client to do a web design. I was looking for somebody to help me with that web design work. I reached out to my closed group of 12 and said, within the context of the context that you know, who do you know who's a good web design worker? Immediately somebody said, I know this guy and he's really good. I met with that person and was able to source that work in order to get that work done for a client, which I kept that client because I now had that resource available to me in order to do that web design work. And so that's an example in when you look at a closed group, is that you're not just focusing on that individual, but you're focusing on the network of those individuals that they're connected with. And if somebody, in my mind, if somebody's in a closed networking group, it's more than likely that, well, we know that, I mean, they're business owners, and birds of the same feather flock together. So business owners know business owners. And so in that, I was looking for somebody who did web design. They knew somebody who did web design, so I was able to easily find that person. And it is a multiplier of the network. So when you look at it, a networker, on average, they might have 10 to 12 people that they're connecting with on a month or every 2 months basis. So 10 to 12 people times 10 to 12, you're talking about 120 different contacts that you are actually connected to. And the factor of all of those really adds up when you think, well, what kind of business am I looking for? They know, more than likely, they know somebody within that field that you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And
Go
I will
ahead.
say, yeah, I will say that that's one aspect, right? So in building my business over this last year, this particular business, not to confuse people, is that represented a third of the income for my business that I grew in this last year. So when we're looking at, the result, this is just one aspect of building that business. There are other ways in which you can build your business, but when we're talking about networking offline, I still feel like a closed group is definitely worth the opportunity and effort to put into it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, especially if you're doing more of a local business, because you're meeting face to face with the people who are in that locality. So that makes perfect sense. So, Shawn, I feel like just because I was so interested in what you had to say about your story there, we kind of got the cart before the horse. I want to back up a little bit and talk about what do we mean, first of all, when we say connections or networking. I mean, those words can be kind of nebulous to people who are new to the scene. So what do you mean when you talk about those things?
So networking connections are simply making and building relationships related to whatever you want to build relationship for. So in this context of what we're talking about is networking for the purpose, connecting for the purpose of building business. And so that's what I mean. That's what I think of when I think of networks and connection. And I think of it more as a relationship than just an activity. And so a relationship is about getting to know one another. You can't replace the time that it takes in order for you to relate to somebody and connect with them. And the reason I make mention of that is oftentimes those that are in the online space make the mistake of thinking that it's just like online. And I would actually say networking the way in which you do offline is the way in which you should do it online, so that you have a more of an impact and more of a differentiation. We may not go into that, but anyways, that's what I mean by connecting and networking.
Okay. Now let's build a scenario here. There's Shawn Manaher on one side and Kerry Green on the other, and there's this networking relationship that is maybe in an incipient form, just starting out. What do you see as the value of that relationship for Shawn and for Kerry? What happens on both sides, and how should each of them be looking at that relationship?
So let's kind of boil it out to even clearer examples, right? So your business, and we'll talk about your business, is that you provide podcasting services, right?
Yeah.
And you and I am doing this Sidepreneurs podcast. And so when the mutual benefit is that we're connecting for the purpose of not only getting to know one another and giving value towards one another, but building each other's businesses up. And so when I go into a networking or into any kind of connection relationship, I understand that there's a give and take in the relationship. And with that said, how this practically works itself out is that when I think of podcasting services, I think of Carrie Green. I'm like, hey, this is somebody who is doing podcasting services. They're doing editing. They're doing the show notes. They're doing all these things that if somebody has a podcast and they're listening in today, I would say, hey, talk to Carrie Green. He's affordable, reasonable, and gets it done professionally. And so that's what I would say, and that's what I'm thinking when I think of a business connection relationship. On the flip side, when you're thinking of Sidepreneur Shawn Manaher, what he does, well, you might be thinking, well, maybe there's somebody I'm meeting that is having a difficult time getting things kickstarted for their business. And Shawn, he's kind of like a strategy guy, and that's kind of some of the things that he's focusing on and wanting to help entrepreneurs launch their side business. So when I hear of somebody that has a side business and is kind of struggling, or hear somebody who is thinking about starting a side business, well, I'm going to connect them with Shawn because he's an expert in that area, and I think he can help them out.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you mentioned earlier that in the connections, there needs to be a sense in which you're giving value to the person on the other end. Talk to me about that. What does that mean, and why is it important?
I don't know who said the quote, but basically, if you want to become a success in life and in business and just being a human, if you give value to another person, that's going to be returned to you without exception. That if you're giving value towards that other person, that is, you're showing them and giving them something that is of interest and importance to them, whether that's your time, your energy, your efforts towards their cause. So if they say, hey, I want to support you, I want to do whatever I can to support you, by giving that value, there's laws of, you call it laws of reciprocity, whereas that if I give something of value to you, there's an automatic unconscious response that you want to give value back, and there's this giving and giving and giving that ultimately benefits each other. But that's what I mean when we're talking about giving value. And value can come in a number of forms and ways, but in a networking relationship, you can understand and know what the value is by simply asking, how can I support your business? So I could say, Carrie, let's say we're meeting on a regular basis. Carrie, how can I support your business? And if I ask that in a meaningful way and know that you're going to give me a response that is what you want, then I know when I'm talking with somebody, I can feed them and show them and introduce them to people who are going to fit that need within their business. If I said to Carrie, what's your biggest struggle in your business right now? And you tell me, and I'm able to fulfill that need as in either finding somebody or doing it myself without cost, without charge, then you're going to feel like I'm giving you something of value. And then in your eyes, I become very much worth a lot, because I'm giving. I'm willing to do that.
Yeah. Shawn, I don't know if you've read the book that's come out recently by Judy Robinette called How to Become a Power Connector. It is an amazing book. You would really appreciate it given everything that you've said. She talks a lot in that about this whole thing, and she gives examples of what she calls her power circles. She has 5 people in one, 50 in the next, and 100 in the next, and there are differing levels of commitment she's making to be connected with those people. And she said the people that are in her most guarded circles, she's very careful about what connections she makes with those people and others that are in her other circles, because she values them so highly, because she knows that if she were to email them or call them or ask them for anything, they would be on it in 5 minutes. And that's because she has given so much value to them. And so she protects that circle. She doesn't introduce them to people that she thinks might flake out on them or won't follow through. And so how do you view that? How do you go about managing these connections you made and valuing them even beyond what they're giving to you?
That's a good question. I think that when I look at the connections that I built, let's say over this last year, and quite honestly, most of my networking has only really done over this last year and a half. I really didn't understand the power of networking. I really didn't understand when people would say in this concept or idea that your business growth and your business potential is like only as strong as your ability and the strength of the network that you have. And I really didn't understand it. Maybe from my background, I didn't like the idea that it really is about who you know, not what you do in that. But when valuing your connections and trying to ascribe the value in what you're going to do in keeping those connections, and who are you most closely tied to, I think if I'm honest, I don't really have qualifications there that I have consciously thought about. I think of a couple of guys like this guy Chris Dreyer from Attorney Rankings. I'm going to meet with him for masterminding for this coming week. I would say that I know that vice versa, either one of us would be willing to drop and do whatever to help one another. And so I think that if I'm thinking out loud on this, is that it would be the way in which to value that is really to understand not necessarily the value that they've given to you, but given the value that they have been, I guess I'm struggling to qualify this, but basically when I think of Chris and what he's done in my business, in my life, he's just given. And it hasn't been in expectation. And so I think in building those circles and building those levels, you just have to really understand who are you connecting with on a natural level, where is there a mutual benefit in what they're doing. And because some people are going to be more takers than givers, but if you find that core group of people that are just willing to give and you're willing to give and there's that mutual benefit there, I think those become your inner circle, and then you start to qualify those others as your network grows. I would imagine in 5 years, as I've been doing this networking thing, in 5 years from now, that there are going to be some people that I've gravitated towards and connected with, and they're going to be much more meaningful, and I'm much more guarded in asking them to do something like you're talking about this author had talked about, which sounds like an amazing book.
It really is. It's an incredible book. You'd really enjoy it. She's a gal. I think she grew up in Wyoming or Idaho, somewhere like that. Never expected to be where she's at, and now she's has close connections with people in the UN. I mean, just amazing story that she tells, and it's all about how she's gone about intentionally connecting. Well, Shawn, I want to thank you for your time. We got a few minutes here left. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Sidepreneurs and your podcast, your website, all that, and what's your thing that you're doing there?
So Sidepreneurs is all about helping individuals launch, grow, and graduate into full-time entrepreneurship. And really this comes out of my own experience as a sidepreneur. And a sidepreneur is somebody who is working for somebody full-time, starting a side gig on the side while they're still working for somebody else, with the hope of ultimately going into entrepreneurship full-time. And so really we're in the beginning stages of this, in my mind, a movement of building a community of like-minded individuals who are focused on building their side business. And so right now we have a podcast and a website that are real two main focuses. And then the other piece is we're building out educational components in the form of free guides and ebooks. So right now we have a free checklist for sidepreneurs or entrepreneurs even who are looking to figure out what the best idea is that they could launch with, what's the strategy that they need to move forward with for that idea, and what are the tactical things that they need to do in order to see that strategy strategy of that ultimate idea move forward. And so we have that at sidepreneurs.com/checklist, which is a startup checklist for individuals, entrepreneurs, or sidepreneurs who are looking to launch their business. And we're really excited about the podcast because it is a daily podcast, and we are having some of the top entrepreneurs, both online and offline, that are really doing amazing jobs in their businesses. And we structure it real quick where we do an interview and an educational segment. So oftentimes podcasts are focused on interviews where you're going to get to know the guest and whatnot, but we also include an educational segment. So every time you listen in on a daily basis to Sidepreneurs, you're getting an educational lesson, whether that's in Facebook marketing, Pinterest, Instagram. What about using PR in your business? What about human resources of hiring and firing individuals? What about raising startup money? All of those questions that business owners, sidepreneurs, entrepreneurs have when they're thinking about launching, growing, and moving into full-time entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, Shawn is one of 25 entrepreneurs who have contributed to my 2-book set, Entrepreneur Mind Hacks. He just talked a little bit about what he contributed in this section on connectivity with other people. If you want to grab a copy of either of those books or both, they're all a pay-what-you-can sort of a model. So you can find those at my website. It's there in the lower third, kerrygreen.com/mindhacks. And go over there and grab it. Spread the word. That's why it's a pay-what-you-can model, because I want more people to get this resource, more people to get their hands on it and be helped. So, Shawn, thanks for all the value you've added to the conversation here. I appreciate having you as a connection, brother. And just want to say, good on you, man. Keep going, grow that show, grow that website. I'm excited for what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Kerry.
Yeah.